Hello, everyone. Ian Hamilton with Good Virtual Reality here. In case you're new here, you can become a subscriber at goodvirtualreality.com. Many episodes of this podcast head out over email first to paid subscribers before publishing everywhere to your podcast platform of choice. Thank you to my founding members and paid subscribers for supporting the production of this independent journalism directly. Today, I'm joined by Jesse Schell, the head of Schell Games, and someone who shares a history in the delivery of VR experiences that goes back about as far as Avi Barziv, who you can listen to on a previous episode of this podcast as he recaps that path from the early 1990s to Apple Vision Pro. Jesse, I want to cover your path into VR from Disney to now and understand where the VR market is going after Meta's major pullback and how you're handling the changing market. Can we start off at the beginning here? When did you first experience VR and how did that happen?
Ooh, what a good question. Let's see. My first exposure to it, I think I saw an issue of Mondo 2000, which was an old tech magazine, and that was just like articles about it and ads for it. And that would have been in the early 90s. The first time I got to try it would have been in graduate school. I was at the Information Networking Institute at Carnegie Mellon University and ended up doing a thesis all about massively multiplayer VR systems. And so, yeah, I would say 92 was the first time I got to try it out.
And then how did you end up being involved at Disney and working on Aladdin's Magic Carpet Ride? Why don't you walk us through what that was and how you got involved?
Yeah, sure. So let's see. So I'd done my master's thesis all about this network VR stuff. I'd been sent there by Bell Communications Research. They sent me to be part of this grad program. I ended up focusing on that. I thought VR was really cool. Then I went back and I was working at Bellcore but not really on VR stuff, but I was keeping a close eye on what was going on in the VR world. And right around that time, my wife and I got married, and for our honeymoon, we went to Disney World, and we happened to see the Mark I version of the Aladdin's Magic Carpet Ride experience, which was very sort of secret at the time. It wasn't like advertised. You just kind of had to stumble into it. And it blew me away. I was blown away. I'd never seen such high quality VR in my life. I was immediately like, how do you get a job at this place? And they were like, oh, no, you can't really. But then after going home, it was about a year later, I saw an advertisement on the Virtual Worlds news group that the Walt Disney Company was looking for people to work at their VR studio. And the things they were looking for were a perfect match with my background because they were looking for people who knew AI scripting languages, which I knew all about. They needed people who had experience with entertainment, theme parks, and I used to be a professional juggler working at theme parks, and people who knew how to build VR worlds. And I'm like, yep, I've done all those things. And I went and applied for the job, and it turns out it was a match because I started there shortly after and ended up working on the Mark II and Mark III versions of the Aladdin's Magic Carpet Ride.
Was that all there ever was? Did they not go past Mark III?
Yeah, no, pretty much there were only three versions. There's technically like a two and a half. The big differences were Mark I just happened in the city of Agrabah, and it was kind of a demo. That was what was initially at Epcot with like 4 seats, but people would get to hear a lecture about VR and they'd watch 4 people do this. It was a little bit of like more of a demonstration than anything else. That was the Mark I version. Mark II, we installed at the Starcade at Disneyland, and it was very different because it was a complete experience that you paid for. And so you had to pay, I think, $5 to go do this experience. It was a complete experience that probably lasted about 15 minutes. And then the Mark III version was part of Disney Quest, and it built on Mark II, but it was multiplayer, so 4 people would go in a group.
Interesting. I think that's what Avi Barziv mentioned was some of that multiplayer functionality when I talked to him.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a really long path there. And I guess I'll go into my own path a little bit here to just contrast. So 2012 was when I got my first Oculus demo and I did the duct tape demo. But that same year, I went out to Disney Imagineering offices in Burbank. And they had a room they called the Dish, and it was
Yeah.
a cave set up with projectors, and they had Cars Land set up in that room. Um, Before it was opening. It was basically, Cars Land was about to open, and they were trying to show off some of the technology behind how they visualized the rides and the land and figured out all their sight lines. And
Yeah.
I've recapped this story a few times over this podcast now because it was such an important demo for me, but it was an important demo to contrast that, which is a very expensive room, with the hundreds of dollars that it would cost for the Oculus system that they were pitching. And that's why I kind of got hooked on VR from 2012. I was just in zombie mode after that, believing that VR is the future of personal computing. And I still believe that today, even though there's this massive pullback from Meta. How do you feel, Jesse, about the future of VR and this pullback from Meta?
Well, I mean, the people always assume that when a new technology shows up, it's either an all or nothing. Either this is going to change everything and we're all going to adopt it immediately, or it's garbage and we can't use it at all. It's stupid. No one will ever use it. And that's not how things almost ever work. Like you look at television as an example. People are like, oh, television showed up in 1950 and it was huge and everything blew up. Okay, but sort of, but also sort of not. It was invented in the 1880s. And people were working on it pretty actively for about 70 years. I mean, there were like companies trying to get television going in the 30s, and people were like, "No, this is never going to work. Are you crazy?" And some things just take time before they cross a threshold where they're like, "Yeah, this is now good enough to meet the purposes." And I think I sort of feel like that is definitely what we're seeing with VR. It's definitely good enough to meet some really cool purposes right now. And we're watching the technology get stronger and stronger. Is it the main way that everyone's going to use computing in the future all the time? I don't think so. I don't think that's what it's for. The thing we always say is the point of VR is to involve your body. If it doesn't involve your body, it probably doesn't need to be in VR. And not everything that you do needs to involve your body any more than we've watched people say, wouldn't it be amazing when the desktops in the PC really embrace 3D? Like they don't need to. A desktop doesn't need to do that. A 2D desktop is fine. So it's a question of like, what's it for? And with VR, we know it's for games. And particularly games that kind of involve physicality. My feeling is probably long term, I don't know. I always look at it and say, yeah, maybe 15% of gaming long term will be VR because I think there's times you're not going to want that. But then there's the question of, well, what about things that aren't games? And that's the bigger question. Are people going to want glasses that augment the world? And why are they augmenting the world? This is an open question that we don't yet know the answer to. Because it could be that no one really wants that long term. Or it could be, yeah, it's just going to take a while because some things take a while. You look at Zoom. Zoom is omnipresent now. But how long did it take, right? AT&T invented that stuff in 1960. But it took like, I don't know, 60 years and a global pandemic to get people to actually use it. So sometimes things take a while.
I had Andrew Ike, the head of Alchemy Labs, one of my first posts on my new site. I asked him that question of how long does it take till we get 1 billion users in VR? And he put things on a similar time scale as you. He was pointing out that it's about 30 years from the first commercially viable version of a product to the mass adoption on the scale of 1 billion users. So he was counting it from 2014. I guess that would be the Gear VR or the DK2 as being the first commercially viable headset. And if you start the timer there from 2014 to 30 years, you're talking the 2040s is when we get to 1 billion people in headsets. What do you think of that time scale and that way of thinking about it?
I don't think it's going to be faster than that. That's interesting. That the notion of when do we have 1 billion is a really interesting question because what we really don't know is what is it useful for on a daily basis? What is it really for? What problems does it really solve? I have theories about it. I know my theory is that probably the killer app will basically be holographic telepresence, the ability to create the illusion that someone is in the room with you. That's something I think that could be very powerful that people will relate to and understand, but it also requires an awful lot technologically. And it has a problem of network externalities because if this, the problem all communication devices have. The telephone's cool, but if my friends don't have telephone's not cool. So you've got some of that. You're talking about 1 billion. I wouldn't put it before 2040. Yeah, I wouldn't put it before 2040, but then it really depends on what are people going to use it for. I think an important thing to pay attention to in this regard is the adoption of smartwatches. Initially, smartwatches didn't take off real fast. but we're watching them gradually creep into people's lives. Just like we saw the DVR was not a quickly adopted technology. It gradually got adopted. And I think this will be something like that. I think we'll have a breakthrough in the way people use the headsets, likely, I think, for communication, and then we will see gradual growing adoption.
Interesting. So I've got to write, I've got to write your estimates, Andrew Ike's estimates there with what we just saw out of Meta, their extraordinary period of investment here, the extraordinary pullback, and I think I want to start here before we get into that subject of maybe recapping the games you've made in the VR space because a lot of them are funded in different ways and I want to understand how they're funded, how they get made, and maybe just take people through sort of a history lesson. You've got Until You Fall, you worked
Mhm.
on Among Us 3D, which I
Yep.
think you just handed off care of that game to the other studio.
To Innersloth.
Um, but yeah, can you walk me through these games and over the last 10 years or so as you've really started making a lot of VR games?
Yeah, I gotta think hard because we've probably shipped about 25 different VR games, so I'm not gonna tick through all of them, but I'll try and hit some of the major points. The initial one for us was I Expect You to Die, which was something we'd started working on even before the store was up. We actually had a level of I Expect You to Die that was up in the Oculus Share before there was actually a store. There was just a place to sort of share free demos. So I Expect You to Die was our first one, and it kind of grew gradually. First, we had the one level that was an Oculus Share, and that was super well received, gave us the confidence to build a full game. We did it under our own power, which made we built 4 levels for it and sold it as a premium title. And then we gradually added levels, which was a little bit of a weird thing to do, but we were watching other people put a title up, and then when the title got older, they'd reduce the price. And we're like, we won't do that. We'll just keep making the title bigger, but keep the same price. So we started with 4 levels and then added a 5th and a 6th and a 7th. I think I've got that right. And then we did a sequel, I Expect You to Die 2, and then we've done a third one as well. I don't know. I don't remember the whole period. I want to say probably those 3 were released over a period of 8 years. So that trilogy has been good news for us, and we've been very proud of those. We did Until You Fall, the sword fighting game. That was one we were very proud about. It was basically, I think, kind of the second one that we had released, but we've done, I don't know, we've done so many. We've Lost Recipes, the cooking game, and we've done some Star Wars things. There was a really cool Star Wars droid repair demo that we did. We did the Kurzgesagt science game called Out of Scale. So it's been an awful lot of games. So Silent Slayer, our vampire game. So it's we've really been into it as a platform and have built quite a few games.
Got it. And yeah, Silent Slayer, that one had a really cool mechanic, a really fun mechanic that really jolts you.
Yeah.
Sort of like Operation in VR.
Yeah, yeah.
A very fun idea, embodied idea. But each of these games hits meta at a different sort of scale of their evolution, or a different
Yeah.
moment in their evolution. And
Right.
I went to all of these Oculus Connects where Mark Zuckerberg is trying to say a billion people in VR, and he's looking to try to do it on the scale of 10 years. And
Yeah.
we're at maybe 1% of that, right? Like it's a very, very small actual uptake of the market. So what does that mean for Schell Games that to miss the mark, for Meta to miss the mark of their goal
Well,
that significantly?
I mean, the world of like what CEOs say and what investors need to hear and all of that is a complicated place. Just because someone has a target of a certain number doesn't necessarily mean they realistically believed. And I don't know, what did Mark believe when he was saying all that? I don't know. It was a cool vision. And I guess the thing I like to frame it with is Oculus and Meta have moved this medium so far. We would be, I don't know, probably 8 years behind on this medium if they hadn't put in this sort of giant investment. And of course, it was a risky thing to do in terms of, hey, is this going to pay off? When is it going to pay off, etc. All of that is kind of hard to know. The thing that has impressed me the most is their long-term commitment to this as a computing platform. because I think the vision that they see is that eventually this is going to be an important part of people's daily lives. And it's like the people working on television in 1930. Well, hey, it's 1940. Television hasn't succeeded. Maybe you should give up on television. Maybe, but maybe you should just work on it 10 years more. It's hard to know. So I guess I look at it as, oh, things didn't go along as fast as folks had hoped, but the thing that is really clear, this is a medium that's not going anywhere. It's not like, I don't know, it's not like something that came and, hey, that didn't work and nobody does it anymore, like 3D TV or something.
Mm.
This is now a medium that's here to stay. It's just a question of exactly how and when is it relevant to who and what is that timeline like? And I think an important part of that is the medium has evolved now to the point that it is ready to diverge because all good technology diverges. That's what technologies do. And we're about to see it diverge into these multiple markets. And so what can look like a pullback or a lack of commitment, I think we're watching all the major companies who are involved with VR. They are realizing that this market is going to go in multiple places and everybody has to kind of pivot a little bit and decide, am I following the hardcore path? Am I following the casual path? Am I following the professional path?
We covered a lot of ground right there in just under 20 minutes. I appreciate how quickly we were able to get to cover this. You're going to get a little bit of my personal thoughts now on this. I've two things. When you talk about embodied and using your body, I think about eye tracking
Mhm.
and whether that counts as embodied or using your body.
Good question.
Does tracking your eye movements count as part of embodiment?
It's a great question. I don't know that I have a solid answer for that because you can have eye interfaces that have nothing to do with your body, and then you can have ones that have a lot to do with your body. And so I'm not sure. I'd have to think that one through more. I don't have a solid answer on that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm looking at the eye tracking interface of Vision Pro with the hand
Yeah.
tracking and the way you
Mhm.
can manipulate windows, manipulate objects with very little effort, relatively speaking. I can pick up the headset without thinking about the controllers. Also, I miss the haptics of the controllers almost always
Yeah.
when I'm using that system. So
Sure.
there's this terrible kind of in between situation. The PlayStation VR2 controllers are not portable. I can't take them with the Vision Pro. They're these big rings on them, and
Right.
I love the ringless system on the MetaQuest. I can take those in a bag everywhere, and
Mhm.
so there's all these different ideas being tried out there. So the other end of this is simulation, high end simulation,
Yeah.
sitting in a cockpit of a plane, sitting in the driver's seat of a car. One of my
Mhm.
podcasts was with Mark Schramm, um, involved in Superhot and working at Creature. And he took me around his living room. He's got photos of his living room where he's got every headset up on one wall. And then you go to another wall and he's got a sim rig. And he's built a quick change system so that he can swap out the flight stick stuff for the car driving stuff in like 30 seconds. He can go from
Mhm.
one rig to the other, and he's got like a Vive tracker on the back of his chair to keep his position set inside VR. He's got almost 100 gigabytes of RAM inside of his PC,
Mm.
which is absurd to think about how much cost that is given the way the market is shaping up. But when I look at the opportunity for Apple in particular is those systems cost SimRig systems can cost $100,000 to put together. Affordable systems in the market are at least $5,000, if not more like $10,000 to
Yeah.
really get your motion tracked, motion moving with the visualizations you see in headset just right. And so I see an opportunity from Apple to do things like X-Plane and iRacing to make those rigs easier to set up, easier to enjoy, and also less costly. You look at a Vario headset that's many thousands of dollars more expensive than an Apple Vision Pro, and you combine that with a nice Mac over there that's maybe a couple $1,000s. You're talking 5 grand in computing, and potentially you're now outperforming some of the highest end rigs that cost tens of thousands of dollars. So, like, I feel like there's a huge opportunity there, but it's at such a different price than Meta targeted here. The $300 to $500 range feels like. Do you think we're going to have to say goodbye to VR headsets that are priced in that range.
In what range? Sorry, which range?
3 to $500. 3 to let's say 200 to 600
Absolutely
bucks.
not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. 'Cause this is what I'm talking about, the fragmentation of the market. Here's what I really think. This is a prediction I've been kind of saying for about two years, and I'm still holding to it. I still think it's right. I think by the year 2030, it's gonna be really clear that there are 3 VR markets. One of them is going to be this sort of casual/kids market because kids love the heck out of VR. They love it. That's part of when people talk about the change in the store. It's because the 3S showed up at such a low price that suddenly kids could afford this. This was now a reasonable Christmas present, and suddenly all these younger people have access to this, and they love it, and they love it, and they play it a lot. So I think that market is not going to go away because they are so passionate. So there'll be that sort of cheap, low end market. There will be the hardcore gamer market, which is a lot of the people that started out really into VR and have gotten a little colder on it because the titles have sort of waned off and the store has focused more on things that are not premium titles. And I think we're seeing the Steam frame, for example, is showing up and like, yep, that's exactly something that is for that kind of hardcore serious gamer market. And I think that'll be priced higher. That'll be like at the high end of consoles. And then you're going to have this third one, which is the professional headset, which probably is mostly going to have higher prices, but that's because it's for serious business. But I think it's going to have a weird overlap where there's probably also lower end versions of it, but we'll see. I think we're going to see that fragmentation as opposed to up till now, it's kind of been, one unit to sort of serve everybody. I understand what you're talking about with that sim market, but that's going to be so niche. Like I know Apple, that's not a sort of market Apple would care much about. The folks who care about that, they're going to be like at the high end of the hardcore, right? It's going to be like, Steam Frame plus plus sort of taken, taken up to that higher level.
What about the pricing of games here? It was interesting the way you outlined. I've seen a lot of devs do what you did there. The example when you talked about I Expect You to Die and adding levels to it at the same price. An example I always think of is hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. I think these up to 20,000 reviews on Steam, and he's had it priced at $20, and he's on update 120 or something. I can't remember the exact update. But
Yeah.
just a 10-year project there, a 10-year passion project from a dev almost working single-handedly in an old edition of Unity because he doesn't want to move his code base to something newer
Yeah.
as it would just cost so much. But $20 there, right? Like, and then there's something like Walkabout Mini Golf, which is priced around that same area, but then there's these $5 packs that add up to more than $100 if you really wanted all of them. If you really wanted the complete
Yeah.
walkabout experience, you're talking about $100 VR game
Hmm.
potentially. And so, like, where do you think pricing goes in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, it's a really good question because one of the things that we've seen with game stores is game stores do not like to be both free and premium. They tend to tip one way or the other. Mobile has tipped totally into free to play. Putting a premium game out on mobile almost seems like a crazy thing to do. On Steam, on the other hand, are there some free to play things? Yes, but they're like pretty small outliers. It's generally a store that is all about premium. And the Meta Store has been very strange because it started out premium and then it sort of started to tip into, when you look at the success of Gorilla Tag and some of these others, we see that the free to play is having huge success. And there's this big debate of like, well, wait a minute. Like, are we in a trajectory where like premium is just going to fall away from that store? Or is this just a temporary thing? Or is this store somehow going to live in a world where it is both premium and free to play living in harmony? That's possible, I guess, but like there's no other precedent for it. So this is the great mystery that everybody who's developing for VR is trying to figure out. My take on it is, since we know we're going to have a market fragmentation anyway, my guess is we're going to see a store fragmentation as well. And that people, like when we start to have the Steam Frame games and we see a new focus on premium, will there be free to play there? Yes, but I think it will be in the minority versus the kids' casual kind of headset. I think premium will be in the minority in that place, and I think free to play will dominate in that place and space. So that's what I think. I don't think free to play and premium I don't think they're good roommates, and I think they're going to split up and live in different places.
Interesting. I'm looking at Golf Plus. I had an early podcast with Ryan Engel at Golf Plus, and he was rolling out their subscription plan quite recently. And there's the dream scenario there of subscribing to this thing on a monthly basis and
Mhm.
being able to log in on your Quest or log in on your Steam frame and your subscription, your purchased media, this hobby that you love, probably in real life, and now you're experiencing the virtual version of it to get more hours in or more practice in, follows you from device to device, and it's not in either store, I guess. It's existing on the internet overall. I don't know if that's repeatable. I don't know if a storefront starts adding subscriptions.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with subscriptions, nobody has people have a finite amount of room in their life for subscriptions, so there's always a small number of them, and the most successful ones are usually the ones that are you like it as a subscription because it's a substitution for something in the real world, right? So golf's already an expensive hobby. If I'm into golf, I'm used to the anchor for what it costs to play golf is already very high, and it's already a lifestyle thing I care about. So having kind of a pricey subscription, yeah, okay, that sort of lines up. Same thing, you look at Supernatural, which was an expensive subscription, and you could say, whoa, compared to other games, it's cost so much. Yeah, sure, but what's it cost compared to a gym membership? That's the comparison. And whoa, it's way cheaper than a gym membership, and so it looks like good value. So I think those things tend to be exceptions, but still, you get one of those, you get it right. It can be a great business.
Mm, interesting. All right, so a couple random questions here. Is there a favorite moment of presence in a VR headset that you can think of?
Ooh, for me personally,
Yep.
wow, I got to think about that because I've had so many interesting ones.
I could ask you for your favorite games, and then we could come back to the favorite moment of
Well,
presence.
I can tell you a moment of presence that really opened my eyes and kind of changed things for me. So I was trying, I'd been doing VR since early 90s. Like I did it at grad school. Then I'm at Disney for 7 years doing as part of the virtual reality studio. Then I come to Carnegie Mellon in the early 2000s and I start teaching virtual reality classes at Carnegie Mellon. And so by the time the Oculus shows up in 2015, I've already been doing it 20 years pretty consistently. And so I'm trying to get people at our studio like, hey, maybe we should do some of this VR stuff at our studio. And some people are kind of into it, and a lot of people are not. They're like, "Oh, this is weird. This is gonna be a fad. This is not gonna be worth doing." And so we got a little project going. I was like, "Let's pull together the most persuasive demos that exist." In the moment, I'm not gonna be able to remember the name of this demo, but there was a demo that really was powerful and was instrumental in the creation of "I Expect You to Die." And I'm totally forgetting who made this, but it was a very simple demo. It was non-interactive. In the demo, you put on the headset, you are sitting at a desk in a room with a lot of little props and things, a lot of little pieces and parts, and it's a very detailed room and lots of little things all over your desk. And then outside the window, you look out the window, and there are weirdly giant Tetris pieces kind of falling out of the sky. And that's the whole thing. You look around at this complex scene. And I remember putting this on and thinking, oh my God, this is the strongest presence I have ever had in a VR experience. And I had to now sit down and think about why is that? This isn't even interactive. What is it? And that kind of gave us the tool. Like we dissected it, figured out, oh my God, it's got the proprioceptive because I'm sitting down and I'm at a desk. It's familiar. I understand what a desk is and what a room is. And so that's all familiar. It's got lots of little details that you can kind of pull your attention and pull your attention and pull your attention. It's got near field, it's got far field, and all of these things together just made it really strong. And it made me really believe in like, okay, strong presence is really popular, really, really possible on this platform, but you've got to understand what like makes it happen. And so for me, that was a very important presence demo.
I love that. That's really fantastic. And you even went through the examples there of how it works. And I see all of it reflected in I Expect You to Die. All of those environments that you pick for I Expect You to Die are familiar. from the
Yeah.
car to the
We
the
Yes.
desk to all of them. Yeah.
Generally. Yeah, generally. We did them all seated, partly because at the time, Meta was basically saying that they were going to insist that players play seated for safety reasons. They were afraid of people standing up. They later backed off on that. But we were like, well, we want people to play a long time. If we want people to play a long time, seated works and seated is safer. And okay, we can do a thing where everything's about being seated. And it did work.
And then Until You Fall was such an opposite end of the spectrum, very active, up and about, swinging your arms as carefully as you can.
Yeah.
What have you learned from all these projects, and what do the next few years hold for Schell in immersive creation?
Wow. I mean, we've learned different things on every project. Every project, we always learn something new. And, we're continuing to do VR and AR development right now. We've kind of cooled off a little bit on some of our own internal IP about it because we're waiting for the market to heat up again. We're working on projects with partners who are excited to kind of keep things moving and keep things going. But we've learned, oh my God, it's so much. Every title like teaches you so many things. And I definitely have strong confidence in the long-term viability and power, not just viability, not just will it survive, but like I really do believe that VR and mixed reality, it's the most powerful digital experience that you can have, and it will continue to be. So I don't know. We're very excited. I'm very excited to see these new platforms come out and just watch the market kind of diversify and sort of see what really starts to take root. And part of what I look at, one of the things I really believe is the only technologies you own are the ones that existed when you were about 10 years old. If something if you were older than that when something's invented, you don't really own it. And we're watching these Gorilla Tag kids. They own VR in a way that the rest of us never will. It's just native to them. It's an important thing to them. It's important to them socially, culturally, the way they view the world. And as they get older, as they move into college, as they go beyond, they're going to be demanding strong experiences in this medium. So, I don't know. So the way we've been excited with all the things we've been able to do and invent and pioneer, but I feel like a lot of that is just getting ready for this to be a mature medium and to see the incredible things we'll be able to do with it when it really becomes a mature medium. And I think we'll really see the 2030s, I think will be about VR as a mature medium.
I want to talk about Among Us 3D real quick.
Yeah.
I remember we talked previously about 1 million people in headset as being a marker
Hmm.
that you were building towards, and it
Mhm.
seemed like you achieved that when like that's why Among Us 3D happened is almost what I took away was here's this opportunity to capitalize on this many people being in headsets and being able to interact outside of headsets. Explain to me what happened with Among Us 3D and why it changed hands and whether you were right about that 1 million people in headset. If you could recap sort of what your thesis was there and where we landed.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, the question of adaptation is always a really interesting question. Something starts out in one medium, and can it go to another medium and be better, be stronger? We see it all the time. There's a book that's like, hey, that's a good book, and people like the book. And then the movie comes out, and the movie is what people really hold and remember and has the lasting and is ends up being more powerful. That happens all the time. And so the question of what can you and can't you adapt and what should you and shouldn't you adapt into VR is a really interesting question because we've watched some adaptations that haven't gone so great into the world of VR. And we were looking at Among Us and thinking, well, I don't know, does this one because it's like a flat 2D game, like why would that on the surface you'd be like, why would you do that in VR? It doesn't make a lot of sense. But as we talked about it, we're like, well, it's funny because it's a game about doing manual tasks and watching your back. And those two things are both so embodied, right? Manual tasks, you'd expect to do those with your hands. And then the business of watching your back, the fact that in VR, you literally have to turn around to see, is someone behind me? Is someone behind me? Like all of that, it's like, ooh, that does feel kind of like, a match. And so we were excited by the idea of it. And, in conversations with Innersloth, this was something that was interesting to them. And so we ended up kind of being able to team up to get it done. They were very interested in having us be a part of that. And it definitely has been the most, in terms of number of players, the most successful VR experience that we've been a part of.
And then it changed hands. Was that part of the plan? Why did it change hands?
Yeah, so you get this question of who needs to work on what and when. I will say the thing that shocked us was we'd been doing Among Us VR and it had been going very well and we were all very happy with it. And we had this idea of like, what if we had a 3D version though? Because that'd be sort of cool. What if like it's already mostly we're partway there anyway. And we're like, let's go ask Innersloth what they think of that. They'll probably say no, because they'll probably say, "Oh, that competes too much with the flat 2D one." And instead they were like, "Oh, no, cool. Good idea. Go ahead and do that." And we all looked at it and said, "Oh, this is gonna be great. This is gonna have as many players as we have in VR, I don't know. We'll probably have 3 times as many in flat? Of course we will. Of course, there's so many more people." And the answer was, "No, that hasn't been true." The VR part of it has been more successful for us than the flat version, which was a little bit surprising. Whereas we had thought the crossover between flat and VR, this is gonna be great because 'cause we'll get the big audience, but we'll also get the immersivity of VR, and we weren't able to make that work. Interestingly, we did a different game, Project Freefall, which was a game all about jumping out of an airplane and everybody's wrestling for the parachute, and we tried the same thing there. We're gonna have that in VR, but we're also gonna have a flat version, and we didn't have good success making that work either. We had way more success in the VR side of it. So that's been really eye-opening for us, as obvious as it should seem that, like, a thing that, like, yeah, if you can get a flat and you can get a VR and they work together, that's gonna be the best of both worlds. We haven't been able to make it work, and I can't really
Mm,
point at any game that's had good success making that work super well.
interesting.
We used to point at Rec Room and say, "Well, Rec Room's kinda making it work," but not anymore. We don't point at that anymore.
No, no, we don't. And that's a tragic one. I mean, I have
Oof.
very vivid memories of what army crawling across my living room
Yeah.
in the first version of paintball that hit the Quest, and
Yeah.
just feeling that incredible, like I'm on a billboard stand somewhere, like army crawling to try to hide my body, but also get a good angle on shooting. And man, that was an amazing moment that I haven't really been able to return back to. What is the role of AI in game development, and how is that coming together?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's such an evolving question. I mean, at this point in time, uh, I'm gonna put out there, most studios you are using some kind of AI generation in their pitch process in many cases because it's just such a fast way to build disposable concept art. So almost everybody that I see is like very few people are not doing that. And then you get into the business of like, well, okay, where else is it make sense to use it? And I'm seeing more and more folks building quick and dirty prototypes of gameplay that are meant to be disposable. Let's just see how this feels. We're not going to keep this code base or anything. We're just going to, this way we can, in like 90 minutes from now, we're going to have a playable version of our idea. And we can, we can just basically go through 10 times as many iterations to get a feel. I'm seeing lots and lots and lots of people do this. Lots of people are being quiet about it because they're worried about the optics of such a thing. So that I think is really becoming very normal because it is such a savings. You just find the fun so much faster. You cut through all the junk when it's disposable. The business of actually having the AI stuff in your pipeline for a shipped game is a whole other matter. You have complicated technical questions when it comes to the art side. You end up like having to just make decisions about what tools are okay and which ones are maybe not okay. And then you've got the question of if you're going to do AI for coding, being able to have multiple people work at once and not step on each other's toes, and as well as all the debugging and all that. That stuff everybody's still working out. But there's no question this is a one-way trip and everybody's going on it. It's just a question of how fast is it happening and in what order is everything going to happen, because the ability to be able to make better games faster using these tools is just absolutely undeniable. Just looking at the difference between the attitude about it at GDC 2025 and GDC 2026, you can just see that this is just a transformation that's happening, and everybody's trying to figure out, well, okay, how do we do this in a way that isn't stupid, in a way that actually is helpful and productive? Everybody's trying to figure that out.
How do we do this in a way that isn't stupid? I love that.
Yeah.
So I think we're moving to the end of the podcast here, and I just want to finish off with a couple sort of these broad questions here. Of I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite game? And you can quantify this two ways, like artistically, what do you think is the best game? And then what is the game that you've spent the most number of hours in? This could be VR, flat, whatever.
Wow, I always have such a hard time with this because, like, I have such a diverse palette of games. Like, my lazy answer is always, "Oh, it's the game I haven't played yet." Like, and so because I really do like trying this and trying that and trying the next thing, the next thing. But in terms of ones that have really stayed with me and really been meaningful, I don't know. I have a few answers. There was an old Atari 2600 game called Mines of Minos that, like, probably nobody played but me, but it had very innovative game structures that were shockingly emotional. I often felt like if Genova Chen made an Atari 2600 game, this would have been his game. That was the game that showed me how meaningfully emotional a very simple game could be. So I think about that one all the time. It's always stayed with me. In terms of games where I put in the most time is a really interesting question. Balatro is definitely on that short list. That it's just so repeatable and you can kind of go so far with it. That's one where I've definitely put in some tremendous time. But gosh, I'm old, right? I've been playing video games for like literally 50 years. And so there's so many that uh that I think of over time. In VR, Until You Fall, that's one of our games. I think I've spent more time, like, what VR game have I spent the most time playing? I think it's Until You Fall. I just love everything about what it feels like to play that game. I just find it so physically immersive and so challenging and rewarding. That's one I keep coming back to. Even though
Uh,
it's weird, like, even though it's our own game, normally you kinda get sick of your own game and you stop, but this is one where I haven't.
Pistol Whip is the one for me there, I think,
Uh-huh.
and similar reasons.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The way it engages the body and that satisfying, constantly satisfying feeling you get with just getting the vibe just right. Is there anything else about, what Schell Games is doing, about the direction of the market, that you wanna talk about today that we haven't covered?
What a great question. Yeah, I mean, we are wow. Wow. I mean, we are always trying to be kind of on the cutting edge of sort of what's new and where are things going. One of the things we've been putting a lot of time in on is the question of generative AI, not for like optimizing your pipeline. Sure, that's fine. Everybody's doing that. But the question is, when the generative AI is in the game, what kind of games are possible that wouldn't be possible, that haven't been possible before? And we've built dozens and dozens of demos and experiments. And I did talk about it at GDC this year, trying to share some of our learnings out about that. But right now, we kind of our internal our internal strategy for our own games is we're trying to do some traditional games, some kind of indie type stuff that would go on Steam. We're trying to do some generative LLM games that are like sorts of things that wouldn't have been possible without this technology, and we're excited about that. And we're actually more and more location based. We've got some ideas for new location based experiences that we're kind of exploring right now. So I don't know. Those are all things that we're excited about and exploring at the moment.
Let me know about, those location-based experiences as you roll them out. I would love to see and hear about them. I've been blown away kind of. I went to, there was a bunch of I can't misconstrue which headsets were in there, but it was a very, very large scale walk around space for the Titanic
Oh yeah,
here in New York, and you get just each area was free roam, and it went through a lot of scenes where it kind of
yeah,
shuffles you down these little corridors, and then you end up in you're in the engine room, you're on the deck, and the ability to just walk around each of those spaces without restriction was an absolute delight.
yeah.
And I can't wait to see more things that really lean into that. So, would love to hear what you're working on in that space. Thank you for the time, Jesse, and hope to talk to you again in the future.
All right. Thanks so much, Ian.